Friends of a Phillip Island mother have rejected claims she was suicidal before she was found dead inside her home. Samantha Fraser's ex-husband is standing trial accused of her murder.
Embracing each other outside court after facing the man accused of killing their friend.
It was a quiet winter afternoon on Phillip Island, Australia. The kind of day where life moves slowly, where locals go about their routines with the comfort of familiarity. But behind the garage door of a modest home on Cowsryle Road, something horrific was waiting to be discovered. Inside, a woman was found hanging. Her name was Samantha Fraser, a mother, a daughter, a friend, and a clinical psychologist with a reputation for compassion and strength. It was July 23, 2018. Just one day after her 38th birthday. At first glance, it looked like a suicide. But something wasn't right. The rope was too long. There were bruises, marks that didn't fit the story. And behind that quiet street and tidy exterior was a truth far darker than anyone could have imagined. Because Samantha Fraser didn't take her own life, she was murdered. And the man responsible was someone she once shared a home with, someone who had controlled her, stalked her, abused her, and ultimately killed her. This wasn't just a tragic death. It was a calculated execution, a final violent act of revenge from a man who refused to let go. And as the investigation began to unfold, it would expose a terrifying pattern and a justice system that failed to protect a woman who saw the danger coming. Samantha Fraser was the kind of person who made an impression without trying. She was born and raised in Victoria, surrounded by the kind of stability and warmth that would shape the rest of her life. From a young age, she had a quiet strength about her, gentle, intuitive, and deeply empathetic. She excelled academically, but never sought the spotlight. What she cared about most was connection, understanding others, being of service in a meaningful way. That instinct led her to study psychology, and in time she became a clinical psychologist, dedicating her life to helping people work through their most difficult emotions. Her work wasn't just a job, it was a reflection of who she was. Samantha was also deeply loyal to her family and close friends. Those who knew her remember her as thoughtful and generous with her time. She was someone you could call at any hour and count on to show up, not just physically, but emotionally. Fully present, she had built a good life for herself. She had a career she loved, strong friendships, and the kind of inner resilience that made people naturally trust her. And then she met someone, a man named Adrian Basham. That meeting would mark the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one that, at the time, held the promise of something more. If you're captivated by true crime stories and want to stay updated on the darkest cases, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We release in-depth crime documentaries just like this one, uncovering the chilling details behind real-life mysteries. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button now. Adrian Basham was born and also raised in Victoria, Australia. His father served as a police officer, a role that likely influenced Adrian's early perceptions of authority and discipline. Adrian himself later joined the Australian Army, where he served for a period before returning to civilian life. He was known to be reserved and private, often keeping to himself and maintaining a low profile. In the early 2000s, Adrian met Samantha Fraser. Their relationship began like many others, marked by mutual interest and the excitement of new companionship. Adrian appeared attentive and supportive, and Samantha, ever open-hearted, welcomed the connection. They spent time together, shared experiences, and gradually built a life that to outsiders seemed stable and ordinary. Although many people that knew them were quite surprised by the relationship, as by then Adrian was known to be rigid, quick to anger, and somewhat of a troublemaker. They later got married in a nice but private wedding. However, over time, subtle changes began to emerge, or for those who knew him since, his real character began to emerge. Adrian's demeanor shifted from supportive to controlling. He started to dictate aspects of Samantha's life, her clothing choices, her social interactions, even her daily routines. These controlling behaviors were not overtly aggressive but manifested through persistent suggestions and criticisms that eroded Samantha's autonomy. As the relationship progressed, the control intensified. Adrian's need for dominance became more apparent, and Samantha found herself increasingly isolated. She withdrew from friends and family, her once vibrant personality subdued by the constant pressure to conform to Adrian's expectation. Friends noticed the change. Samantha seemed anxious, cautious, and less engaged. Even after the birth of their 3 children that should have calmed him down, it had little to no effect on his behavior. Samantha began to confide in close friends about the difficulties she was facing. She spoke of Adrian's controlling nature, his unpredictable moods, and the emotional toll it was taking on her. She expressed feelings of fear and helplessness, unsure of how to navigate the escalating situation. As a psychologist, she had tried several methods and approaches for him without success. The domestic violence she experienced was not limited to emotional and psychological abuse. There were instances of physical violence that left her shaken and fearful for her safety. Despite these challenges, Samantha continued to fulfill her roles as a mother and professional, displaying remarkable resilience in the face of adversity. The relationship, once filled with promise, had devolved into a cycle of control, intimidation, and abuse. Samantha's world became increasingly constrained, her sense of self eroded by the relentless pressure exerted by Adrian. The support of her friends and family provided some solace, but the pervasive nature of the abuse made it difficult for her to envision a clear path forward. After a while, he started becoming more physical with the abuse. This period marked a significant turning point in Samantha's life as she grappled with the realities of an abusive relationship and began to consider the steps necessary to reclaim her autonomy and safety. Leaving an abusive relationship is never easy. It isn't just about walking out the door, it's about untangling yourself from fear, control, and years of manipulation. But the physical part was too much to bear. Samantha Fraser did it. She left Adrian Basham, and in doing so, she took her first real step toward freedom. She first moved out of the house with her 3 young children, 2 girls and a boy. Then she filed for divorce next, which she was given the house, and she eventually moved back with their children. At first, the change was subtle. She began to reclaim her space. Physically, emotionally, and mentally, she moved into a new home on Phillip Island. She was surrounded by friends again. Her children had a safe and nurturing environment. She went back to doing the things she loved, working with clients, reconnecting with people, making plans for the future. But leaving didn't mean she was safe. Not really. Adrian Basham wasn't the kind of man to let go quietly. Samantha knew that. And that's why, when the time came, she made a decision that took extraordinary courage. She reported him to the police for rape. The charges stemmed from events during the relationship, moments of violence and violation that she could no longer keep hidden. And it wasn't just for herself. She wanted to ensure that no one else would ever have to face what she had. By the time charges were formally filed, Samantha had already confided in multiple people, friends, colleagues, even professionals she trusted in the mental health community. She told them she was afraid, that he was watching her, that she didn't feel safe. They believed her. She was not the kind of person to exaggerate. She was calm, measured, but even in her careful words, the fear was unmistakable. Still, she moved forward. She took every precaution. She installed security cameras. She stayed in regular contact with loved ones. She documented her concerns. She kept a record of his behavior. And yet, she could sense it. Something was building, something dangerous. Because the more she asserted her independence, the more she refused to be intimidated, the more unpredictable he became. He kept harassing and threatening her with calls, promising physical violence since she had taken everything away from him. Samantha Fraser was doing everything right. She left, she spoke up, she asked for help. After a year of the separation, she started to relax a bit, as she felt the threat from Adrian was easing a bit. She even celebrated her birthday just a day before. But in the background, the threat was growing louder and closer. July 23, 2018 began like any other winter morning on Phillip Island. Samantha Fraser, having celebrated her 38th birthday just the day before, was up early, preparing her 3 children for school. After dropping them off, she returned to her home on Seagrove Way in Cowes, unaware that her estranged husband, Adrian Basham, was lying in wait in her garage. Basham had arrived at the property earlier that morning using a motorbike to travel to the scene, and he entered the garage and waited for over 2 hours, anticipating Samantha's return. When she arrived and parked her car, Basham ambushed her, launching a brutal attack. He inflicted 41 blunt force injuries, leaving her with severe trauma. In an attempt to disguise the murder as a suicide, Basham staged the scene by suspending Samantha's body from the garage door. He then fled the scene, leaving behind a meticulously arranged tableau intended to mislead investigators. By mid-afternoon on July 23rd, something felt wrong. Samantha Fraser was always dependable, especially when it came to her children. When she didn't arrive to pick them up from school, it raised immediate alarms. Friends tried calling, messages went unanswered. Within hours, a friend, one of the few people who knew just how serious Samantha's concerns had become, contacted the police. Officers were dispatched to her home. What they found inside the garage was disturbing. At first glance, the setup resembled a suicide, but that impression didn't last long. The positioning of the body, the injuries visible on her face and body, the items left behind in the garage, the rope she used to hang herself was too long, making strangulation almost impossible. It all felt off. Experienced investigators recognized immediately that something didn't add up. The more they looked, the more the scene began to unravel. Samantha had suffered extensive blunt force trauma. Her injuries were violent, sustained, and not consistent with any method of self-harm. Also, Samantha had dried blood under her fingernails, suggesting that she had fought her attacker. The blood was sent to forensic unit to find a matching DNA. The garage, once a place for storage and safety, became a sealed crime scene. Evidence markers lined the floor. Forensic experts began combing through every inch of it, meticulously documenting blood spatter patterns, broken objects, and the staging efforts used to mislead them. Word began to spread. Phillip Island was a quiet community, tight-knit, peaceful. Murders weren't common here, and certainly not like this. Not someone like Samantha, not a mother of 3, not someone who had spent her life helping others. Shock rippled through the town. Grief followed closely behind. People couldn't comprehend it, how something so brutal could happen to someone so gentle, right in their own neighborhood. The question quickly shifted from what had happened to who would do this and why. The answers were coming, but first the pieces of a carefully constructed lie had to be taken apart, one detail at a time. In the immediate aftermath of Samantha Fraser's death, investigators quickly turned their attention to her estranged husband, Adrian Basham. Their suspicions were fueled by the couple's tumultuous history and recent legal proceedings, and the blood under her fingernails had proven to be his. Forensic analysis of the crime scene revealed inconsistencies with the initial appearance of suicide. The extent and nature of Samantha's injuries, combined with the staged elements of the scene, pointed towards a calculated attempt to mislead authorities. Further investigation uncovered evidence of premeditation. The killer had brought items to the scene specifically to stage the suicide, indicating a deliberate and planned act. Surveillance footage and phone data placed Basham in the vicinity of Samantha's home on the day of her death. This, coupled with his known history of controlling behavior, solidified his position as the primary suspect. Basham was arrested on August 2, 2018, and charged with Samantha's murder. During initial interrogations, he at first denied any involvement, claiming that he had not been to the house for a long time. When officers showed him surveillance footage of him in the vicinity and cell phone data showing him around there during the time investigators believed the murder took place, he changed his story that he had indeed gone to confront Samantha and they had a physical argument, which was why he had scratches on his face and his DNA under her fingernails, but that she was well when he left, and she probably had taken her own life as she could not deal with her unfounded accusations against him. However, the evidence contradicted his account, leading to his continued detention pending trial. The trial commenced in March 2022 at the Supreme Court of Victoria. The prosecution presented a case highlighting a pattern of coercive control and escalating violence throughout the couple's relationship. Testimonies from friends and professionals revealed that Samantha lived in constant fear, having taken measures such as changing locks and installing security systems to protect herself and her children. They also presented all the evidence against him: cell phone data, surveillance footage, DNA from the blood, her blood on his bike. The prosecution detailed everything, showing the timeline of the murder. Basham's defense team argued that the killing was not premeditated. They contended that there was no evidence Basham was aware of the existence of the rope used in the hanging until he was inside the garage, suggesting that the use of the rope arose spontaneously. On April 21, 2022, after weeks of harrowing testimony and forensic evidence, the verdict was handed down. Adrian Basham was found guilty of the murder of Samantha Fraser. The jury had heard about the 41 blunt force injuries. They had listened as friends and family described the emotional toll of coercive control. They had seen the surveillance data, the forensic findings, the staged scene. In the end, they were unanimous. It was murder. Planned, violent, and deeply personal. But the legal process wasn't over. In February 2023, Basham returned to court for sentencing. Justice Leslie Taylor addressed him directly. She described the crime as objectively heinous, calculated, premeditated, and committed with the singular purpose of silencing a woman who had dared to stand up to him. Taylor acknowledged Samantha's strength, how she had tried to protect herself, protect her children, and hold him accountable, and she acknowledged the devastation he left behind. Basham was sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 30 years. In court, Samantha's family members spoke through tears. They described the gaping hole left in their lives: a daughter, a sister, a mother, stolen from them in the most brutal way. Her father, who had since taken on the role of raising her children, spoke of the unimaginable burden of loss. Friends described her as brave, kind, a woman who gave everything to others, until one man took everything from her. It was the justice they had fought for, but it could never return what had been lost. And as the sentence was read aloud, the courtroom sat heavy with silence, not of relief, but of grief. Because this was not just the end of a trial, it was the end of a long and painful chapter for a family forever changed. Even after the verdict was delivered and the sentence handed down, the story didn't end. In 2024, Samantha Fraser's 3 children, still minors, still grappling with the weight of her absence, initiated a civil lawsuit against Adrian Basham. Represented by a legal guardian, they sought compensation for the psychiatric harm and trauma his actions had inflicted on their young lives. The suit marked a rare but powerful move. Children taking legal action against the man who not only killed their mother, but forever altered the course of their own futures. Their claim underscored the generational ripple effect of domestic violence. The way it doesn't just end with the victim, but echoes outward, leaving emotional wreckage in its wake. The damages sought were not just financial. They were symbolic, a recognition of suffering, of pain endured quietly behind closed doors, in therapy rooms and late-night conversations with loved ones who would never be able to explain why. At the same time, Basham launched an appeal against his conviction. The process paused parts of the civil proceedings, introducing new legal complexities. For Samantha's family, it was another wound, another reminder that even when the system works, closure is rarely clean. Still, they pressed forward. Samantha's father, who had stepped in to care for her children, became a public voice for change. The Fraser family spoke out about the failures in the system, about how Samantha had done everything right and still ended up dead. They lobbied for greater protections for victims of family violence and for reforms that might have made a difference if they had come sooner. In the years since her murder, Samantha's name has become more than a headline. It has become a rallying cry, not just for justice, but for prevention, for awareness, for accountability, because no family should have to endure what hers did, and no child should have to grow up with a legacy of violence where a mother's love used to be. And if you're fascinated by true crime, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon to never miss an upload. We have more gripping stories coming soon, shedding light on cases that deserve to be told. Stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one.